Alright, hi guys, welcome to another video where we'll be continuing where we left off in the previous video where we implemented the dummy phaser. We implemented a box, right, moving across the screen basically. And we'll be doing that again in this video, only this time we're actually going to use phaser. So I'll be using the git to get started. And I'll be putting that within this directory I'm currently in. So nothing new here, you've seen this a couple of times before. What I want to do is basically replace all this. I'm getting an error on phaser here. If I pm install, actually in the right directory, that should take care of that. And while we're at it, I could explain this actually a little bit. So as you can see, phaser isn't actually imported anywhere over here, and yet the template comes with using phaser, phaser.auto, phaser scale, fit, whatever, phaser.game, very important here. We're creating our game, just like we saw in our dummy phaser. But where is this phaser coming from, this globally defined phaser? So if I go to my node modules, so as you remember, when I didn't install my node modules, I had an error, but after I did, it got resolved. If I go to node modules and I go inside phaser and I go inside its package.json, you see there's this browser dist phaser.js, and that's basically the entry point when phaser is running in a browser, right? So the long and the short, okay, the long story short, basically, if we have a look at this phaser.js, and I just remembered not to open it in VS Code because it might hang. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it in Vim, phaser dist phaser.js. So basically, if you have a look at this, we have a function over here which is called immediately with this and an object, but it doesn't really matter because we're not going to the details of this. As you can see over here, it's saying if we have exports and it's an object, which won't be the case in the browser, we have define, it's a function. We have at the end of all this, we have this basically on root, define this phaser object and assign it to whatever the factory returns. And at the end of all this, after phaser is actually imported in the browser, you will have the global phaser object basically. That is from where it's coming. We're not going to go inside the details of it, but all you need to know is that as soon as you import something from phaser, so if I go into any one of these, right, they're importing scene from phaser. If I were to, for example, comment all these out, I get the same issue again. What is phaser? Because phaser, the module hasn't been loaded, right? But if I just import at least one of them, it imports scene from phaser. And here, if I follow, here it takes me to the TypeScript definitions. The TypeScript definitions are basically saying that, listen, they are namespacing it in phaser, but this is not enough to know where it's coming from. It's actually coming from that JavaScript file. Okay, it is eventually defining a phaser object to work with, right? If we run this in the browser, then you can just go inside the console, type phaser, and you'll see it's the object defined. But anyway, so that's basically where it's coming from. I don't like doing this, so I would actually import phaser from phaser. I will be doing that, but let's just move over to the aim of this video is actually to re-implement what we had before, right, with phaser itself. So what did we have before? Let's start bringing over the box scene, for example. I will do this step by step, and we'll see what's missing and what we have to change. So I'm going to remove all these scenes actually. So remove those scenes. I can remove all these imports. Let me see, I probably need to keep phaser there because I'm using, actually I don't even need to keep it. What I'll do is I'll just import what I need. So game, for sure. I'll be needing scene as well. I will not be defining that as a rect game object. This.game was a shortcut I used in my dummy phaser. If we want to get the height, actually phaser itself on the scene, I can use this.scale.height. So basically, We have a scale manager on the phaser scene we can access, I mean. But I decided not to add that to the dummy phaser because basically we didn't need it. And there's only so much you're gonna add in a dummy implementation of phaser, just to showcase. The idea of that exercise was to give you some kind of reference point, right? So now we'll be using phaser, but there's a lot of things that are basically a black box if you haven't used phaser before. So the idea was to kind of make that black box a little less black or something. I don't know, but I think that was a good idea. Anyways, so to get the height of the screen, we can do it this way. And I'm actually also doing that over here. So this dot scale dot width in this case. Other than that, we still have the same sort of thing, right? We have our super, we're calling with the key, that's fine, that's great. We can add whatever, we can add the player, and the player speed it's not phaser dependent. Create is still the same in phaser, right? Like we've been doing in phaser. You have on add here, you have the game object factory, similar to what we had. And we're just basically creating okay, it won't tell me the type here. It's a phaser game objects rectangle, but it's not typing it because this dot player up here hasn't been typed as that. So you could stay adding the type, but we won't be doing that. Let's just move ahead because we've seen how to type this before, right? You would simply get this. Where did it go? You would simply take this and put it inside the JS docs, right? So with that, I have the box scene, which I can pass in over here. And one difference, which I chose to pass in instances, and what phaser takes. So let me take you back to. First of all, I use scenes instead of scene. And we'll see that actually in phaser, the scene config, it doesn't have to be an array, but so in our dummy phaser, we gave it instances, and in the phaser one, you would not pass in instances, you would pass basically a function or class. And so here we could change ours to simply just new this up, but basically I made the decision to just go with an instance object. So in this case, we just pass that in. Over here in the template one, is giving us a scale which we can remove. The background color is certainly not the same color that we used. So let me just bring the previous main, where is it? Over here, that over from here, background color. The width and the height, sure, let's go with the same kind of dimensions we had before. This one, the type here is just to choose the renderer. So it should give me some documentation maybe. This setting will auto-detect if the browser is capable of supporting WebGL. If it is, it will use it. If not, it will fall back to the canvas renderer. So basically WebGL is going to use WebGL on your browser. The parent, this is we've seen a couple of times before in the index.html. There's this ID inside of which we will be rendering. And with that, I have the box scene set up, but I'm still missing my other one. So let me just bring it over from this file, text scene. That will be over here. And actually, one thing I can mention here, first of all, let me just remove that. One thing I can mention over here, as you can see, config here is untyped, so it will not actually be helping us. We can do the same trick we've done a couple of times. I can go check what type this is, and then I can go type it. In this case, I will do it because we may want to add some more things here. Type and just paste it in here. That's one way of doing it. Another way, so over here now, as you can see, I have the properties available to help me fill the config in. Another way you could have done this, instead of typing the variable, you could have just passed it in straight away, and then TypeScript will know. Since you're passing the object to the new game here, TypeScript knows that this object must be of the type that the game takes, right? Which is the config of the game. All right. So we have our box scene over here in Phaser. You can pass in an array, just like we were. And the first scene will be the one that auto starts. Unfortunately, here we don't have a way to move from one to another, right? So what we can do, actually, the template comes with a snippet we can just reuse. So I can just grab this code over here and I'll explain it later. But if I wanted that on click, basically switch scene, then on create, in the create method, I could add this and simply make sure I start the correct scene. So that would be the text scene in the box scenes case. And in the text scenes case, that will be the other way around, right? So over here, that'll be the box scene. All right, so with that, I think I can fire this up. And we have similar results. If I click, I get the hello world, and click again and going back to the box scene. You may notice that there is sometimes speeding up and slowing down. But even if it's not visible, one thing we could do if we wanted to frame limit in Phaser, there is an FPS limit option. So if I set that to 30, we'll basically get to do what we did previously, right? To simulate a slower or faster machine. And that's a bit more consistent. Okay, so what I would like to do now is to present you with a small exercise, which you can pause the video and try it out. And then unpause and I will be doing it basically. So the idea here now, what I want to cover is that if you remember in the very first, not our dummy phaser, but the bare bones, just request animation frame loop we did when we were switching from one scene to the other, the box didn't just start again from the beginning, right? I would have switched to this scene, hello world, and then when I switch back, the box continues where it left off. So that's what I want us to cover now that we have Phaser, and basically we don't have to stay messing around with our dummy Phaser. I mean, this is something you can easily do, and as a hint, you can command or control click on start, and that will take you to the type definitions, specifically of the scenes over here, the scene plugin. And one of these methods is the method you're looking for. So I'd like you to basically read a bit the start, the restart, etc. And one of these methods is the method we're looking for. Once again, what we want to do is to be able to not start every scene from scratch, right? So pause the video and give that a go. Okay, so hopefully you were able to find the method in question. And that would be, instead of start, we're interested in switching the scene, right? If I go to the types here, I see that switch makes this scene sleep, then starts the given one. And that's exactly what we're interested in for this use case. So I'll need to change it over here too. And we're almost done. As you can see here, this .input.once, that works well when we're shutting down the current scene and starting a new one, because we're only ever interested in listening to pointer down once for the lifetime of the scene. But since we're not actually shutting down now that we're switching or sleeping, that will introduce a new issue, which I can demonstrate right here by when I click back now, I expect the box to be around this position and continue, which is the case, so that worked. But now if I click, nothing happens. And that's because of we're only listening to clicking once. So just change this to on instead of once. Then that fixes that. Now we're able to basically go from one scene to the next as often as we want. And the once, I'll just remind you, that came from the template, right? There was a snippet of code copy-pasted, and that worked well for when you're starting a new scene and you're shutting down the existing one. But in this case, now that we've changed it to switch, we'll need to use on. Okay. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.